The rain hammered against the windows of our little cottage in the Cotswolds, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. For 15 years, I, Ansel, had been a devoted husband to Isolde. I worked tirelessly as a landscape architect, pouring my heart into creating beautiful spaces for others, while our own lives seemed picture-perfect. We had met at university, two young art students drawn together by a shared love of color and form. Now at 44, I thought we had built a life that was the envy of our friends. I was wrong. It started subtly. Isolde, a successful novelist, began working later and later. Her explanations were always plausible deadlines, writer's block, demanding editors. I naively accepted them. I'd make her dinner, a simple pasta dish or a hearty stew, and she'd arrive home, her face flushed, full of apologies. The dinners grew cold as she'd work until past midnight. She'd say she was working on her new novel, a historical romance set in Victorian England, but the spark in her eyes seemed different, almost feverish. The first real crack appeared during our annual trip to Cornwall. We always stayed in the same quaint bed and breakfast, walked the same coastal path, ate fish and chips by the harbor. This year, Isolde was distant. She spent hours on her phone, supposedly researching her book, but her thumbs flew across the screen with a speed that suggested something more personal. She'd laugh softly, a private, secretive sound that I hadn't heard before. One evening, after a particularly tense day, I decided to surprise her. She'd said she was going for a walk on the beach to clear her head. I followed, intending to join her and smooth things over. I found her not on the beach, but in the arms of a man I didn't recognize. They were locked in a passionate embrace, the wind whipping around them, their bodies pressed together as if they couldn't bear to be apart. The world tilted. The sound of the waves faded, replaced by a deafening roar in my ears. I stood there, frozen, unable to move or speak. Isolde finally pulled away, her eyes widening in horror as she saw me. The man, tall and handsome with a rugged jawline, smirked. He actually smirked. "Ansel," she stammered, her voice trembling. "It's not what you think, really." "Because it looks an awful lot like you're kissing another man," I said, my voice dangerously calm. The man stepped forward. "Look, mate, these things happen, these things," I repeated, my anger finally breaking through. I lunged at him, fueled by years of suppressed frustration and the raw, agonizing pain of betrayal. He was younger, stronger, but I fought with a ferocity I didn't know I possessed. We wrestled on the sand, the waves crashing around us, until Isolde managed to pull us apart. "Stop it. Both of you," she screamed. "This is ridiculous, ridiculous," I yelled at her. "My wife is kissing another man and you call it ridiculous." The man, whose name I later learned was Barnaby, sauntered away, a smug look on his face. Isolde turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. "It just happened," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "What does that even mean, Isolde?" "I don't know. I've been feeling neglected, I suppose." "You're always working, always focused on your gardens. You never pay attention to me anymore." Her words were like a punch to the gut. Neglected. I had dedicated my life to making her happy, to supporting her dreams. How could she twist things so easily? "That's a lie," I said, my voice shaking. "I've always loved you, Isolde. I've always put you first." "Maybe," she said, her eyes hardening. "But love isn't enough, Ansel. I need excitement. I need passion, passion." She found passion in the arms of a stranger on a windswept beach. The drive back to the cottage was silent and tense. I felt numb, as if I were watching my life unfold from a distance. That night we slept in separate beds for the first time in our marriage. The next few weeks were a blur of arguments, tears, and accusations. Isolde insisted it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. She begged me to forgive her, but the trust was gone, shattered into a million pieces. How could I ever look at her again without seeing Barnaby's face? How could I ever believe her words again? I tried, I really did. I suggested therapy, date nights, anything to salvage what we had, but Isolde seemed different. She was still distant, still secretive. I started to suspect that Barnaby wasn't just a one-time fling. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I did something I never thought I was capable of. I hired a private investigator. A woman named Juniper with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I felt ashamed, spying on my own wife, but I couldn't live with the uncertainty any longer. Juniper was efficient. Within a week she had photos and videos. Isolde and Barnaby were still seeing each other. They met in secret cafes, rented anonymous hotel rooms, even took a weekend trip to Paris. The evidence was undeniable. The day Juniper presented me with her findings, I felt a strange mix of relief and despair. Relief that I finally knew the truth, despair that the woman I loved was capable of such deceit. I confronted Isolde that evening. I laid the photos on the table one by one, each image a dagger to the heart. She stared at them, her face pale. This time there were no excuses, no denials. "It's over, isn't it?" she whispered. "Yes, Isolde," I said, my voice flat. "It's over." The divorce was bitter and acrimonious. Isolde fought for everything she could get, claiming I was emotionally abusive and that the affair was a result of my neglect. Her words stung, but I refused to be drawn into her game. I knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. As I started to rebuild my life, I focused on my work. I threw myself into creating beautiful gardens, finding solace in the earth and the rhythm of the seasons. I found a small measure of peace, but the pain of betrayal lingered, a constant ache in my heart. One day, a few months after the divorce was finalized, Juniper called me. "I have something you need to see," she said, her voice serious. I met her at a coffee shop near her office. She handed me a file labeled Barnaby Croft Background Check. I opened it, my hands trembling. What I found inside shocked me to my core. Barnaby Croft wasn't just a handsome stranger. He was a con man, a professional seducer who preyed on vulnerable women. He had a string of victims, all wealthy and successful, whom he had charmed and then fleeced of their money. He was a master manipulator, skilled at spotting weaknesses and exploiting them for his own gain. I felt a surge of anger not just at Barnaby but at Isolde. She had fallen for his lies, his empty promises. She had betrayed me for a man who was nothing but a parasite. But then something else washed over me, a strange sense of pity. Isolde was a victim too, albeit a willing one. She had been blinded by her own desires, her own insecurities, and had walked straight into Barnaby's trap. I decided to confront her one last time. I found her at her new apartment, a sterile, modern space that was a far cry from our cozy cottage. She looked tired and worn, her eyes shadowed. "I know about Barnaby," I said, my voice calm. "I know what he is." Isolde's face crumpled. "He left me," she said, her voice breaking. "He took all my money and disappeared." I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She had lost everything: her husband, her reputation, and her savings. She was alone and broken. "I'm sorry, Isolde," I said, my voice softening. "I truly am." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I was so stupid," she whispered. "I ruined everything." I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked away, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. In the end, there was no grand revenge, no dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet acceptance of the fact that some wounds never fully heal. I moved on with my life, building beautiful gardens and finding solace in the simple things. But the memory of Isolde's betrayal would always be there, a shadow in the sunlight, a reminder of the fragility of love and the devastating power of deceit.